By using decent couplings and appropriate curves, can we stop these dreadful derailments we have? Here's how I've tackled it. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. Now this video is all about curves and couplings. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's the issue that couplings or the tightness of the curves or whatever cause these wretched derailments that we have. And for some reason, mine seems to be the only channel on YouTube that has derailments, and I don't believe that's true. It's just that other people tend not to film them. But it gives the viewer a false sense of their own ability, because if you think nobody else has derailments and it's just you, then clearly, you feel like you're doing a naff job, and rest assured you're not. It's just that other people aren't as honest as they could be. Right, so what causes derailments? Well, I think it comes down to three things. There's either the first one, which is obviously your rolling stock. And it's not always your fault either, because it can be just by poor design. I mean, some steam engines have 460s, the pony wheels at the front are very light and they just bounce around, and sometimes it's poor design, they need to be weighted down. Or perhaps the back-to-backs are out when you buy them and you need to adjust that. So rolling stock is one thing that you need to keep an eye on, but it isn't necessarily your fault. The second thing, I think, is the track. Now, the track can be your fault because it's just pure bad track work, to be honest. We've all done it. I'll show you some in a minute, but poor track work. But then again, it might not be your fault because it could be down to poor track design. I know at our Model Railway Club we had an issue with a Pico three-way point, and from that day to this I hate them. And some people leave comments that they're lovely, Charlie, what on earth's wrong with you? You clearly haven't got a faintest idea what you're talking about, which might also be true. So there is poor track work, your fault, poor track work by design. And the third factor I seem to think is speed, because if you're anything like me, just turn it up a little bit train set like, whack it along, and guess what? It ends up in a big crumpled heap in the corner because it didn't make that point, or that curve was too tight. So we talk about track work and curves and tightness and all this sort of stuff, because these all lead to derailments. But so do couplings, and we're back to rolling stock again. Now, as you know, I've completed Helix 1, and in the next video I'm going to build Helix 2, though it will be a sort of a time-lapsey thing. There's no way in the world I'm going to build the whole Helix and take a day and a half to show you a video, which I did a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, so I'll show you how it starts, time-lapse for the middle bit, and show you the end. So we'll sort of get into the guts of how I'm using someone else's design to put this Helix together. But before I do that, I want to test the Helix that's just behind the camera, Helix 1. So with various locomotives and various couplings at various speeds, I wish to run them across this bit, down the Helix, around the fiddly yard, back around that reverse loop that I showed you last week, back up again, back into the station, hopefully in one piece. But if it doesn't get there, to get to the bottoms of the problem. Oh, that was a mouthful, wasn't it? Right, before I go into that, there's the subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed, it's time to hit it. It's free, so come and join the rest of us. Now I need to admit a fault, well, three issues I had with the last video, the designing the reverse loop video. As you may recall, I was trying to change points 70 and 71, and I kind of looked in dismay over to my left because I could hear another point changing, and I was right. I had 2 points numbered 70 and 71 through the stationary decoders that I use. Bit of a dick, really. Anyway, sorted that out, and as you can see here, it's been renumbered. Another problem was, I think it was point 67, and if you can look at this decoder here, 67 has been replaced with an X, and what it is, on that DS64, that third output doesn't work, so I've taken that point off and put it into another feed from another DS64 to make it work. So that was sorted out, and now the major issue was a complete and utter gung-ho attitude by me of laying the point work. Now during the last video, when I made up this board and put in the reverse loop and all the point work and all these Digitrax bits and all the rest of it, I appear to have gone a little bit rogue. And Lee, my trusted track planner, was soon to point out that this point here is actually in the wrong place, because the line that comes out of it as the on the inside of this one, as it goes towards the helix area to the left of that peak, should actually be within that area drawn on the board. So I've got an issue. What I need to do is to do a bit of moving of points, I'm afraid. You see, this section drawn here is the first part of the helix. Now this inside line is the one that comes off the helix, but this line here should actually go like that. Now clearly, oops, sorry about the peak. Clearly that's unacceptable. So what I need to do is move this point back down into this direction, where I can get this track to run in a much more acceptable approach into this line. And I think that's the sort of area we're talking. So this point is going to have to come out and move it back over here, and then hopefully that will address my fear, or not address my fear, how about address my mistake. A little bit of an S-curve will come there, sadly, as it comes around here and down there, but there's no two ways about it, so I need to crack on with that one before I do any more testing. Well, you'll be pleased to know that work is now complete, and you can see here where the new line, which is the up line into the helix, will actually go, making a much more smooth transition for the up line onto the helix. And this was the item that I missed off. I forgot to draw around and position this first assembly prior to putting in this point, and that's where it originally was, and all I've done now is moved it down to where Lee wanted it in the first place. Okay, let's run some trains and see what can go wrong. Now this is my HST unit. It's a sort of replica, if you like, of one of the first in the West Country in 1976. A bit different than most other people's, because this one's got 2 first class, and thanks to Laura, and I'll come back to Laura in a different video, because she's done a huge amount of modifications to one of these buffet cars. It's all to do with trubs and trucks, and but we'll save that for another time. So it has 2 different buffet cars and then 3 second opens. Yes, it does. But the couplings on this, I've already modified them. I got onto Chris Hunt from Hunt Couplings, and he sent me the coupling pack, and they were a bit too far apart. I thought, and I wasn't really happy with it, so I got back onto him and he sent me the close coupling pack. They were too close together. So what do? Well, what I've done is every other coupling is different. So I have a close coupling and a normal coupling, and that way it should go down the helix. It's the downside of the helix, because it's a 3rd radius curve, they get a bit close. So I'll show you these couplings, and as you can see here, one is slightly longer than the other, which pulls the coaches closer together. Exciting stuff. Right, let's send this on its way and see if it ends up in a big heap. Now this 125 is what I would call a scenic train, and as such its sound plays only when it's outside of the fiddle yard and coming off the helix. As a matter of interest, it has both a sound chip in the power car and of course the dummy car as well. So I'm going to run it now on the scenic section at speed 40, and we'll see how that shapes up, and then when it goes onto the helix we'll drop it to speed step 30, and any second now it should move off. God. In the right direction. You couldn't make it up, could you? So there she goes into the Helix, and I'll drop the speed to 30 and kill the sound. Well, we certainly know issues up to now, though clearly we shouldn't speak too soon. And now onto the last circuit of the Helix. Marvellous, marvellous. Right, let's investigate. Now I'm hoping that that little derailment on the Helix was due to the back-to-backs on this restaurant buffet car. And to that end, what I shall do is whip off the bogies and have a little look. So here's one of the bogies out of the restaurant buffet car. And this is a back-to-back gauge. And this one's made by DCC Concepts, and it's a 14.5 millimeter. And if I show you on this vernier scale, hopefully you might be able to see that. So there we are, 14.4, let's get it right, 14.4x, 14.5. Now, one interesting about having a vernier scale is the other measuring tool on the other side, because if you put it against the wheels on the inside, it will give you the current back-to-back. And this current back-to-back is 14.2. So we're almost half a millimeter out. So what we do now is we get this little baby here and we drive it into the bogie, into the backs of the wheels. Now hopefully you can see this. You kind of sort of just force it in and give the wheels a spin. And there we are. Beautiful. Do the other one. Now, I'm not going to bore you to death, but you need to do the others, obviously. Now, hopefully when I put this back on here, we will have some measure of resemblance. Just zero it. Then hopefully this will come out at about 14.5. There we are, 14 point, give it a whittle, 14.40. I suppose if I pushed it a little bit, it will go up. So there we are, we're almost in the zone for it, 14.44. In fact, we'll give that another poke, just to make sure we're in there. And I'm sure we're good to go. Right, there we go, 14.5. Okay, let's get it back on the train and give it another go right through the Helix. So we shall set this one off as usual at speed step 50 with the sound on for the scenic level, and hopefully we'll have a little more success. And as usual, entering the Helix, I shall now bring the sound down to turn the sound off and bring the speed down to 30. And hopefully this time we shall have a little more success. And if I zoom in a little closer, I believe this is where the derailment happened before. So we're watching for that restaurant car. And we appear to have success. Lovely. So she makes her way around the fiddle yard and then down into the large set of points. Now here we have the oscillating wheel scrubber, so I shall turn that on and then So that's those wheels being scrubbed, but of course there is a risk of a derailment because of the oscillating arms. Right, that seems fine, so we'll turn the scrubber off and then switch back to our train, which now goes through our reverse loop. And all being well, it should head back up to the scenic section. And then as she comes back off the Helix, then the speed goes up to 50. And on goes the sound. So we'll slow her down as she comes back in, and fair to say that all seems well. Lovely. Right, let's get this one parked and out of the way and move on to something a little more challenging perhaps. Right, here's the next one, and we've got a Elgin 47, or Hellion if you're middle class, with a rake of 5 old Hornby Freightliner sets. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Freightliner sets used to come in blocks of 5, so you get 5, 10 or 15 in a train, and I've got a simple rake of 5. Between my wagons, I've got KD couplings, and so we'll see how they get on. Between the loco and the first one, I've just got the ordinary D-link, and we'll sort of see how they get on really. Bit of a risk, isn't it? But the trouble also with KDs is vertical curves, and if you don't know what a vertical curve is, it's where it goes from flat to a dip or perhaps goes uphill, because the KDs then can come out and break away. So we'll see how that happens on both coming off the viaduct to go down and also the Helix as it flattens off, again because they've got a vertical curve. If they're a bit stiff, of course, they don't like to go around bends, so it's all a bit of a risk. And one fine chap, one of our subscribers, showed me some photographs of his, and he's converted his to West Hill Wagon Works magnetic couplings, and he's made a pretty nifty job of them. This is not, in my mind, a scenic train. This isn't one that just comes up from the fiddly yard, does a lap and disappears down and then comes back up 20 minutes later. This is a train that I wish to operate because I will have a small Freightliner depot on top of this reverse curve area. There's lots to go on there, and a small freight terminal is one of them. So I need to be able to automatically uncouple from my loco and stick it on the other end. So in this instance, KDs will be essential. So we'll send this one off on his little travels and see how we get on. These are renowned for being difficult wagons. I've converted the wheels from the dreadful plastic Hornby ones to metal ones from Pete Spares. If you need to do that, you might need to take out a second mortgage. It's clearly not cheap. And obviously the KDs have gone in, and they're quite light. So in the fullness of time, I may need to weight them down. And these Freightliners have a habit of bowing in the middle. And if you do get them bowing, then you need to put a wood screw, if you like, into the bottom of these to get it to flatten out. Anyway, that's where I am with mine. So we'll send Thor on his way with our little train and see how we get on. I won't film all of this now. I just want to. I will film it all, but I'll show you the bits of interest, such as any derailments I get or any issues with the wheel scrubber and that kind of thing. So let's just get this one on its way and see how we get on. Right, let's send her off at speed step 20 and see how that goes. It seems a reasonable speed, so I think what we'll do is we'll keep this speed is a constant right through the helix as well. Got a bit of a squeaky axle I can hear. Well, completely uneventful coming off the helix. Ooh, it's not like that, did it? What's going on here? Ah, it would appear there's a piece of bodywork on the front of the loco that's striking against the rail on the rail of on the way out. So we're going to have to do a little bit of modifying on the front of Thor to make sure it rises over the top. Okay, let's put the scrubber back on and then Thor back on. To make sure that all works. Hang on a minute, we've had a breakaway, we've had a breakaway. In all the excitement, I never noticed that we'd lost a couple of wagons. Right, the train's complete once more, so just turn him back on to 20. Just a matter of interest, in the bottom of the shot now is that reverse loop controller, and you'll see it flash from green to red in a second. There you go, and that's how the train leaves that reverse loop. Right. We've still got a complete train for a change. Let's see if it goes around the rest of it. We still have our squeaky wagon. Unfortunately, our 5 Freightliner sets. Okay. Into the helix. Well, I think that was a reasonable evolution, really. Clearly we've got a bit of coupling work to do and also sort out those front lugs. And just looking at these lugs here, I'm not too sure exactly what the purpose of them is. I mean, what they model, whether it's something to clear stones from the track or that kind of thing. That's probably what it is. But I think a little snip on there will soon sort that issue out. Lovely. What's next? Now the next one on the list is probably one of my favourites because of a couple of things really. The first thing is the price. They're free because when you buy a Bachmann Mark 1 and Mark 2 coach, you get these little hose type couplings. Hopefully you can see one there. Nice dainty little thing really. But the real trick is when you come in nice and close and you can see that when the wagon turns, it expands, and this is known as a kinematic coupling. And what it is, it's close coupled there, and when it goes around the curve, then it expands. This is marvellous. I know Hornby have sort of copied, surely not, that sort of design. They have an inferior one on the Pullman coaches that I own, but on this train here, which is my class 50 with 8 coaches, I have them all the way along. I haven't used them on the loco to first coach coupling yet, but I will work on that. Please excuse the state of this class 50. It's got the wrong couplings on. Some of the numbers are different from side to side. It needs a bit of repair. It needs a bit of TLC, to be perfectly honest. Anyway, we shall send this little baby on its way and see how this fares. I thoroughly believe that these couplings with this train will make really short work of this helix. Now I've turned off the sound on the Class 50, so we shall now bring up the wheel cleaner. Beautiful. Now we're back into the reverse loop and away. A real beauty, that one. Now this little train is quite an interesting one really, because it's made up of Bachmann coaches, but coupled together at the front is a Bachmann warship and an old style Bachmann warship with the very old D-type tension lock couplings. Now on this old warship I've removed the hook because it's an older system. The hooks were of different lengths, and I hook it up to a normal modern NEM type coupling. This loco is dead, there is no guts in it, there's no motor or anything, but I just sit it with this one to make it look like an effective double header. Coaches wise, all this string of coaches are made by Bachmann, and they've got the normal NEM type kinematic coupling, as you'd expect, decent couplings. The trouble with these is when you go down the helix they tend to rise up on each other and cause issues. That's all except for the last coach, because the last coach is an old Bachmann and this has got the old D-ring again, and it's far from ideal, let's say. So what we shall do is pop this one onto the train and see if it causes any issues. So let's send her on her way and see what she can do. I hope you agree, this is quite a nice looking train, because I've split the livery between BR Blue and the Days of Crimson. Makes it quite an attractive little train. And into the helix with no problems. Now I don't deny it, I really could curse at this because I've had numerous problems coming down the helix with these type of couplings, but sadly today it's running perfectly. Well, it would, wouldn't it? Well, I hate to be one to say I told you so, but clearly we had an issue coming around that last bend. Well, clearly Kelly has decided to throw herself off. The first warship is fine and the front bogie of the first coach is coming off as well, but Kelly seems to be the issue. So I'll take her off and check her back to backs. Well, that's just about typical, isn't it? If you're not filming it, it happens, and when you are, it never does it? And no problems on there. I must confess I'm a little disappointed. I really didn't expect it to get down the Helix, because I have had issues which I'd hoped to reproduce today, but clearly that's not going to be. So still intact, the train heads into the Helix. And we've got a derailment. Something's off somewhere. Let's see what it is when it comes around here. And it's a backman coach. So we'll try and stop it where I can actually get to it and put it back on the tracks. We'll see what the problem was. Well, we'll pop the coach back on, and that one there will remain a mystery. But it's the second from last coach, so we will just double check those back-to-backs in a bit. Well, it wasn't uneventful, was it? So let's stop it and take a look at that the second from last coach. Now the back-to-backs on the dummy warship wasn't that bad, to be perfectly honest, and on this coach here they're at about 4.3 rather than 4.5. which isn't exactly the end of the world, but it could be an issue. So in the long term of things, we just sort of put these back to, what do we say, this is a 14.5, isn't it? So we get that one in there. Blimey, that is tight. And with ones that are a bit tight, there's no harm in whipping the axle out. He said, not being able to get the axle out. Come on, you so-and-so. Mind you, the harder it is to get out, the harder it will be to get back in, no doubt. Right, whip that out, and then obviously you can do it much easier out of the coach. Blimey. Wow, that was surprisingly stiff. So there's this coach to do. But what have we proven from this train? Well, clearly it wasn't uneventful. So we need to reconfigure this, take a look at it, check the back-to-backs throughout the train and run it through. The main thing that I'm concerned with is not actually the odd one that derails, it's actually the effectiveness of that helix, because that helix has to be, you know, kind of 99% free from derailments as an acceptable level. You know, I'd expect the odd train to derail because of, you know, perhaps poor maintenance on my part or poor building, you know, from when I put it together. But what I don't want to do is obviously repeat those errors into that new H2 helix. Anyway, this train was less than satisfactory, so there's some work to be done here. Now to round off, we've got a ballast train led by a lovely little Class 22 with sound as a matter of interest. We have 10 Elgin Dogfish ballast wagons, and then finally at the back end a shark. There we are. How exciting. Now these wagons, these 10 hopper wagons, have been nothing but a pain to me. They really have being an awkward little wagon. I bought them off a friend and the wheels are filthy and I've struggled to get them clean, but we are getting there slowly. There's a couple of problems with them. I had to remove the tension lock couplings, which I showed in a previous video, because they hang so low they would short out on the points and I'd get a short circuit. So I've replaced them with Hunt couplings, and these are the close couple ones, and they are very close. Going down my third radius curve on the Helix, the buffers are almost touching, if not making a very sort of loose contact. But it's when it comes off of the Helix at the bottom, it tends to end up in a big crumpled heap. Now, obviously today I've got the camera out, so that's bound not to happen. Or is it? Now, one advantage with magnetic couplings is if you get a big derailment, it ends up in a big heap. At least the loco has a chance to break away. And also, oh, marvellous, look, there we go, look, beautiful. What could possibly go wrong with this? I've long believed that there are issues with these Dogfish wagons, and I believe their weight is a contributing factor. So let's try this again and see if we have the same dreadful outcome. Anyway, we'll send them down the Helix and see if we end up in a big crumpled heap, as I did a few weeks ago. Well, completely out of character, it appears to have got down the Helix in one piece. But can it negotiate the fiddle yard? But all good up to now. Well, it was all good on the wheel cleaner front, so let's get her back into the fiddle yard proper and up the other end of that Helix. Do you know, I thought for a moment then that my fears were ill-founded, but I've just spotted the first wagon has got a wheel off. You see it there? So I should just do a little bit of manhandling here. And all the rest seem okay. And now with the sound on, she comes back up into the main scenic area. Quite surprisingly intact. Now, I must confess, these magnetic couplings from Hunt are absolutely brilliant, to be perfectly honest, especially if you're not in the situation which I am, where I can have fixed rakes of trains, because if you remember, the Mark IIs were using the Bachmann pipes, and of course, you know, I can't break that train up easily, and if you want to, you know, take your stuff and go and play trains on someone else's outfit, then you can't do it. Whereas this train here and my HST, which is again all with Hunt couplings, you can. If you're interested in them, there is a link to Hunt couplings down in the Show More tab. But these wagons, the story when I mentioned that there can be other problems with it with the rolling stock and it's not your fault, is right, because I think all of these wagons are actually too light. They are quite flimsy and they need to be weighed down. And I'm sure you know that I'm involved with McKinley Railway, and if you go to that channel and look up I think it was the weight of freight, and they go into the formula for how much weight they add on depending on how long the wagon is. And it's an interesting concept, really, but it's the sort of thing you could just, you could just toss a nut or two in the back of each wagon, send them around until you find the right weight for that sort of train. It's an interesting thing anyway. But what's wrong with this one then? I think it is the weight of these wagons. They're flimsy and they jump, and they've never jumped off that diamond crossing before. But then, who knows? It's not fair, is it? Let's be perfectly honest. We all expect the best from our trains, and we just don't get them. Now, of course, one aspect is talking about tools. So, what do I use? Well, I suggest you buy yourself a little vernier gauge, because not only can you measure the insides but the outsides, and measuring the back-to-backs before you start work is actually quite interesting. You do need a back-to-back gauge. So this is from DCC Concepts. It's a 14.5. You can get 14.6, 7, 8, 9 as you go into fine scale, and you can also get ones that are less of a size. Smaller is the word I'm looking for, and a pair of tweezers for getting the NEM couplings to come out. Now, I have a couple of boxes of couplings, and I use the really right box size with the dividers to put my couplings in, because otherwise you end up in such a mess you can't find any of them. But there we go. So there we go. That kind of wraps that one up, really. But the main point I was trying to make is that Helix. Before I build H2, I've got to prove the technology that's involved with Helix 1. And to be perfectly honest, it seems absolutely fine. You've just got to make sure that the access is easy. And on that one, of course, it's against a wall. So if I get any problems, I have to be able to get inside it to sort the problems out. And because I'm going to build a branch line station over the top, now is the time to sort the problems out before I build the branch line station. It will always be removable, yeah, all right. But with the new Helix, of course, I've almost got 360 access to it, so it's not such an issue. There we go. Hope you found it interesting. So that's it. Curves are both, left and right, and vertical, and on an incline. They're worth thinking about when you design your railway. So, make sure your first, second, third and fourth radius curves, make sure that the stock that you're running is capable of going around those curves without buffer lock and buffer clash and all this sort of stuff. And make sure your trains are actually heavy enough. If you've got heavy wagons at the back of the train and light ones at the front, they'll always derail, because the front ones will get pulled off because of the weight of the ones at the back. Little bits of physics, really, all kind of straightforward. So what happens next? Well, in 2 weeks' time, hopefully you can join me when I build the second Helix. It won't be a long video. There'll be a bit of video at the start, then time lapse in the middle, a bit of video at the end, and also go into the maths of how you calculate the distances between the levels on the height you wish to achieve. So it should be a bit interesting for everyone there. And the lessons I've learned from the first Helix that I will not be putting in, or will be putting into the second Helix. So that wraps this one up, and what I would like to do is, as usual, thank the patrons, because they help to keep the channel going. If you'd like to become one, then hit the button, hit the subscribe button. It's free if you're not a subscriber, and a video here and here, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks a lot, take care, bye bye.